Hello, today we will be discussing a dark comedy, thriller Korean movie, where the deaths of some old people flame the fire for suspicion of a serial killer on loose. We are first introduced to Shim Deok Shu, an old man who is known to be grumpy and has short temper. He is a landlord and owns many buildings. His reputation is of a man who harasses his tenants for rent. He is not liked in the town due to his rather rude conduct and rough way of speaking. In the beginning, he visits one of the tenants who hasn't paid the rent for the past 2 months. Mr. Choi, the tenant, has injured his back, so he has not been going to work lately. He demands the rent as soon as possible. Mr. Choi is being visited by charity workers, and he is having lunch with them. Seeing the insensitive attitude of Deok Shu, the volunteers try to make Deok Shu understand how working for Choi would not be possible at the moment. Deok Shu walks away, unmoved by the volunteers' cries for empathy and unconcerned about their future attempts to guilt-trip him. On his way out in the town, he comes across a dead body of an old drunk man being cleared. There he also meets one of his tenants, Ji Eun, who lives in room 205. He asks her about the rent and she tells him that she will give it soon. Later, one of the children playing notices a dead body of an old man in his room. Deok Shu is annoyed by this ordeal. He wishes of all things he doesn't want to die like that. In the evening, Deok Shu revisits Mr. Choi. He notices that the doorknob of his house is broken. Mr. Choi has prepared an extravagant feast for his former colleague who has yet to arrive. He requests Deok Shu to join him. The two men start eating, drinking, and chatting. In the conversation, Mr. Choi reveals that he was a former police detective. He reveals that he worked in a case similar to this 30 years ago. The two men who have died recently were likely killed by a killer who was practicing on the elderly first and going for young women later. He also tells Deok Shu that the two people who died used to hang out with him in church. There was another old man who has been absent for a few days now. That man owns a dog shelter. Mr. Choi thinks it's the same killer from 30 years ago. Late at night, when Mr. Choi is sleeping, due to the door to his house being open, gets attacked by the killer. In the morning, when Deok Shu comes to repair the doorknob of Mr. Choi's apartment, is met with a very shocking scene. Mr. Choi is dead and has a rope tied around his neck. His death is ruled as a suicide. The two charity workers also accuse Deok Shu to have pushed Mr. Choi to commit suicide, as he had the habit of harassing his tenants for rent. The whole town now sees Deok Shu in a negative light and treats him like a murderer. Later, quietly, Deok Shu visits Mr. Choi's house. As he is going through his stuff, a man appears and throws him on the floor. He asks Deok Shu about Mr. Choi's whereabouts. When he finds out he is dead, he refuses to believe it to be a case of suicide, as Mr. Choi has recently bought a flight ticket to America in order to see his son. Late at night, when Ji Eun arrives at home, she notices her roommate in the bathroom not moving. When she gets close, she notices that her throat has been slit and she was dead. As she tries to call the ambulance, she heard the footsteps in her room. The killer has yet not left the house. A struggle between the killer and Ji Eun starts. She tries to run out of the house, but the killer bashes her head and kidnaps her. The next day, Deok Shu again meets the man from yesterday. He introduces himself as Mr. Choi's former partner, an ex-detective, Pyung Dao. He explains to him how all the murders are interconnected, as it is similar to the case from 30 years ago. He shows him the profile of the girls who were previous victims. As Ji Eun fits the profile, they rush back to check. They find the apartment empty. But Pyung Dao notices some washed bloodstains in the bathroom. When he opens the fridge, it has the body of Ji Eun's roommate. However, Ji Eun's whereabouts are unknown. Pyung Dao convinces Deok Shu to not lodge complaints in police, as it can stir the killer to kill Ji Eun, and that they should rather look for the killer themselves. Mr. Choi has kept thorough research and findings of the past 30 years. In it, they find out the only person to survive 30 years ago was a woman, but she lost her memories due to the trauma. The woman is the sandwich cafe owner who is also a tenant in Deok Shu's apartment. Pyung Dao shows Deok Shu the diary Mr. Choi left behind. In it, he wrote the name of all the suspicious people living in the town who could be related to the crime. Now, they both team up to find the killer. They go through all the names written in the list, crossing out the people who seemed innocent. Soon they visit a doctor who has at the moment organized a free medical camp for the people. Pyung Dao explains to Deok Shu that the doctor has moved to this town just 6 months ago with his paralyzed wife. He goes on to say that serial killers often use children or families as a guise to protect their identity. Pyung Dao barges into the line to talk to the doctor. He starts asking him strange questions. The doctor suddenly leaves as his wife needs his attention. Pyung Dao becomes sure that the doctor is the killer. Meanwhile, Ji Eun is shown to be trapped and tied in a closed room somewhere, with a man injecting her with some drugs. Pyung Dao now comes up with a plan. He tells Deok Shu to go to the doctor's house to look for Ji Eun. Meanwhile, he will keep an eye on him. As Deok Shu reaches his home, he does not find anything strange in particular as his house is like a maze. Pyung Dao in the middle of tailing loses the doctor. As Deok Shu is about to open a locked door in his house, the doctor appears and tries to stop him. When he does not call the police on him, Deok Shu gets suspicious. Pyung Dao also arrives there in a state of bad injury as he met with an incident on his way. He points his gun at the doctor and Deok Shu barges the door open. Inside the room, they find pods of poppies. The doctor confesses that he has been using this room to grow poppies, which are illegal, but it is to help his wife as poppies help with muscle spasms. He begs them to not report him as his wife cannot survive without him. However, Pyung Dao does not believe him. In the midst of anger, he starts throwing the pots and even tries to shoot him. The doctor tells Deok Shu to check Pyung Dao's pocket as he might have something there. Deok Shu finds a hospital tag around Pyung Dao's neck that has his name on it and it mentions that he has Alzheimer. The hospital picks him up but Pyung Dao keeps shouting that he is the killer. Deok Shu has still not given up on finding Ji Eun. He now goes to look for the old man who owns the dog shelter and has been missing for days. He finds him in his house, dead hanging from the ceiling. He finds there a piece of cloth and a key. He now suspects a man who recently visited him to get a duplicate key. Deok Shu now uses this key to break into his house. In his drawer, he finds all photographs of all the recent victims. A policeman who has also been looking for clues comes across Deok Shu. He previously thinks it was Deok Shu who is a killer. But when Deok Shu reveals the finding he understands the truth. They find the work ID of the man. As they both try to catch him, he flees. The policeman gets unconscious from the fall but Deok Shu chases after him. As he is trying to run away, he gets hit by a car and he dies. The police conclude that man was the serial killer behind the recent deaths as the evidence from his home proved that he in fact had some grudges against older people. Something still feels odd to Deok Shu as the whereabouts of Ji Eun are still unknown. He believes the serial killer to be an elderly man. To find some clues, he meets the sandwich cafe owner and tells her that he knows what happened to her. He asks her to think of any clue that can help track him. She reveals that she doesn't remember anything except for the fact that the man had 6 fingers in his hand. Deok Shu now visits Pyung Dao in the hospital, but Pyung Dao, because of his medical condition, is not able to recognize him. As he is leaving, he hears Pyung Dao say something strange. He keeps repeating that he did tell him who the killer was. Deok Shu goes to meet the doctor again under the guise of getting a checkup. As he is taking his pulse, he asks him about the scar on his thumb. The doctor tells him that it is a scar from a previous injury. Deok Shu tells him that he feels like it's not from an injury but rather from a previous operation to remove a finger. The doctor, in order to make Deok Shu quiet, smashes his head and gets him unconscious. It is now revealed that in the room where he grew poppies, there was a secret room where he hid Ji Eun. He brings his wife to the secret room as well. When Deok Shu asks him why he is doing this, he tells him that he is fed up with his wife, but when he saw Ji Eun, she reminded him of his wife in her prime. He now plans to make Ji Eun his wife after killing his present wife. He has been injecting Ji Eun with the drug to paralyze her whole body so she does not leave. As he is about to kill his wife, Pyung-dao, who has escaped from the hospital with his son's gun, appears. He shots the doctor, which injures his ear. A fight breaks out. Meanwhile, Deok Shu along with Ji Eun tries to run away. However, the doctor heavily injures Pyung-dao and rushes behind. As he is looking for them, he is attacked by Deok Shu, but he easily shakes him off and beats him. Pyung-dao also appears not too late. They both try to stop him and in the end succeed. The killers get caught and now Deok Shu is shown sitting in a hospital recovering from injury as he is visited by Ji Eun and the sandwich cafe owner. They all are in good spirits and happy to be able to survive. The movie ends on a happy note. Thank you for watching. Please like, share, and subscribe if you liked our video. And click on the notification bell to get updates on new videos.